We're recording, Steve.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, you looked very shocked. He's for those of you that can't watch because no one can watch because we don't have a video of this. We're drinking tiny little espressos on this podcast.
Yeah. It feels dainty in my hands, but it's delicious. And I feel the shot of energy.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good podcast.
I hope so. I hope it's our best ever.
That's a tall order, man.
I know. But we got a lot to cover today's podcast. We have gotten away from it a little bit. You know, summertime, things get crazy. We had some guests come in.
Yeah.
We had some other stuff going on. You were on vacation.
I bought a new house. I had some weird head problems, medical stuff.
I feel like you can't just tell people you had some weird head problems and keep going. What is it called? It's called visual dysplasia? Is it?
Encephalopathy.
Oh, I wasn't even close.
Yeah, no, you were way off on that.
Where did I get visual dysplasia
I have
from?
no idea. Yeah, old head injuries, I guess. So, yeah, I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
I got a good neurologist help me out. And, yeah, a lot of tests and studying and doctor visits and trying to figure things out. But I think they got me on the right track. And, I feel pretty good. So no more flashing in the eyes. I remember a couple episodes ago, I had mentioned I had some weird eye flashes. I think I was doing the podcast with sunglasses on. So I haven't worn sunglasses in a while, and I feel back to my normal self. So, yeah, back to the podcast.
All right. Well, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We have 3 in the news stories. One of them focused on some illegal landlord activity, something that, you should probably learn from on not being greedy as a landlord. A star that has passed away was helped out by his landlord. And then also some changing dynamics of the rental housing markets, especially in the higher end rental markets of what's going on. We also have a landlord hotline call that we're going to be going over and kind of diagnosing and assessing. But that is all right after this.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
All right, Steve, we're going to start off with a friendly story not a friendly story. It's a story from our friendly neighbors to the north.
Yeah,
Canada.
I actually recognize the townships they're talking about here. I drive up there pretty frequently.
Well, that's good. You can correct me if I say one of them wrong.
Okay.
So what we have here is a article from CBC News of Canada, and this comes from Lisa Zing.
You pronounced that correct.
CBC?
Canada. It's correct.
Oh, thank you.
You're good.
Canada. So it's called, the title of this article says that a landlord illegally collected $5,000 in rent from college students while listing the rooms on Airbnb. So this was posted on September 6th from Lisa Zing, and it's talking about a student at Umberg College in Toronto is warning others to know their rights after she and her roommates found out their landlord was collecting thousands of dollars in rent from them while subletting their rooms and listing them concurrently on Airbnb this summer. So Alida, it's getting harder and harder to know people's names. Alida, would that be your guess?
Sure.
I like Alida.
Yeah.
Alida Budgeon Stratting, who's 20, rented an apartment near Umber's Lakeshore campus, which, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Umber?
Yeah.
All right. With 2 other students during the last school year. It was her first time living away from home and her first experience as a runner. So when the school year wrapped in May, she and her housemates decided they wanted to sublet their rooms for the summer. I actually did the same thing when I did college housing. And her and her housemates were headed back to Guelph.
Yeah.
All right. While another was going to Ottawa. The roommates sent the landlord, Kathleen Beale, various prospects for subtenants, but Beale did not approve them. So one of her housemates grew suspicious of the landlord's response and decided to search for the apartment on Airbnb while he unexpectedly found a listing. So at the same time that they communicated that if there was no one subletting it, then she wanted to continue to have access to her home throughout the summer as she was still paying rent on it. So they sent the landlord an email and the landlord replied no. So they could not get the furniture back until September 1st. And because I had turned the keys back, I was no longer a tenant, which I thought was weird. So I won't go too much further into this article, but basically what we have going on here.
The old double dip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tenant wants to sublet. Landlord says no. Tenant hands over key since they're, the lease is going to be up in a couple months anyways. Now cannot go back into the rental. Finds out that the landlord is listing the rental on Airbnb.
it's a shame because, we know so many good landlords. We got a great group of landlords in our Facebook community, and every good landlord knows, a bad apple ruins the bunch. Landlords get a bad name, and it's usually because of stuff like this. You get stamped.
Greedy.
Yeah, you get stamped with the greed label, and very few are like that. But this is the stuff that usually does it. It's just flat out greed. There's no other way to label it.
The one thing that I thought was weird was she said she gave her key back, but then she said she needed to come back and get her furniture. And I'm like, well, how would you hand over a key but then leave your furniture? Like, I would never,
Yeah.
But then that's also kind of crappy, is that this person's furniture was being used as part of the upsell for the amenities of this, Airbnb apartment. So they show a bed on here. I don't know if that was, what the college student was sleeping on.
Right.
Poor, person staying at this place using some other college student's used bed.
Gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the final verdict was that the mother of the students or the parents of the students came forward and talked to the local tenant board, landlord tenant board, and they handed down a written decision that Beal, the landlord, had to pay back $4,852 to the students for collecting rent illegally from the tenants starting on May 1st, 2018. So it doesn't look, I was kind of surprised they didn't get any kind of fine, just kind of had to pay back the essentially the summer rent to the students. Yeah,
and I would say I've been seeing Canada a lot more in industry news. And Canada's laws are leaning more and more and more towards consumers, as obviously U.S. laws are as well. You're just definitely not going to get away with this kind of stuff anymore. It'll catch up for sure. So there's no point in trying to double dip. I'm sure the landlord thought it was a great idea to, earn some additional revenue off that that rental, but it's just not the right thing to do in that situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lisa, for writing that article and letting us feature it on. Well, I say letting us, I just did it.
Yeah.
I don't think she'll care.
No.
I'll send her an email and say, hey, Lisa, we talked about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Should be good.
All right. Well, I decided to wedge. We got 3 stories. I guess this is a sad, happy story. But I'm sure most of the listeners of this podcast and people in general heard that Burt Reynolds has passed away recently. I believe he was at the age of 82. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, the Bandit, man. I was
Yeah.
heartbroken.
He died last Thursday at the age of 82. I reportedly suffered a heart attack. But, one of the ways I find articles is I put it into this tool we have, and I look up, like terms like landlord and things that get a lot of shares. And one of the articles we found here was that he spent his last days at his longtime Florida home thanks to a kind landlord. So Bert, he had ran into some financial troubles after a divorce, and he was forced to sell his Florida home, and he sold it to actually a neighbor, Charles Modica, for $3.3 million. So Modica, who lives next door, he had told TMZ Friday that he was always intended to let Reynolds live there out of respect for what Reynolds has done in Florida. So apparently he's done a lot of good work in the Florida area. And so he only charged Reynolds pennies for rent. I didn't, say what it was, but it was a super small sum.
It's Burt Reynolds.
Yeah. Oh, and I texted you. I don't think I heard back. Did I hear back from you on the little Burt Reynolds trivia that I sent you? Steve's a big Star Wars fan, and apparently...
he tried out for Han Solo?
No, he was offered the role of Han Solo. They wanted him to do it in the Star Wars movies, and he turned it down. So that's how Harrison Ford ended up with that role.
He'd have been okay in that, I think.
They said it would have been weird because, for the most part, everybody was an unknown.
Yeah,
and at that time, he was a huge name.
Right.
It said something, I read something that for 4 straight years, he was the highest grossing actor in Hollywood.
Right.
And that's never been done before. But unfortunately, he did land on hard times, but because of this nice neighbor who rented out his own property back to him for pennies, he was able to stay in that home. And it's worked out for the neighbor, too, because he bought the property for $3.3 million. He believes it's now worth between $4 million and $5 million. I think.
Yeah, I love hearing stories like this. I know a lot of times, especially like we talk about in the Facebook community, landlords have their guard up. They're always worried they're going to get, taken advantage of, and you don't hear a lot of situations where the landlord is willing to make an exception, and it may not seem fair. Well, it's Burt Reynolds, but you may not give everyone that same pass or that same courtesy. But I've definitely seen it in the group, and I've heard people talk about it. Somebody, a longtime tenant came down with an illness, or they had cancer, and the landlord helped them out. Or
Natalie, I think her name was Natalie Whalen, out in Chicago area. She was like helping him even drive to the appointments and stuff like that. A tenant of like almost 10 years or some very long time.
Yeah.
And you like to hear that stuff because the last story we just went over, you get branded with those negative connotations, and then you hear good stories too. So it's always good to highlight the good ones.
I think the takeaway from this is, the one thing that you got to say about landlords is you definitely develop a good sense of judging a person's character, right? You can usually tell after you've been a landlord for a while, I'm sure, good in people or who to stay away from and not to, spend energy on. So
sure. History is a good teacher, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like, if you're a landlord out there and you got an opportunity to help somebody, don't pass on that opportunity. If Burt Reynolds, needs a helping hand, I'm glad that the landlord helped him out. It's awesome to hear.
I'm younger than you are, so I feel like Burt Reynolds has a different.
I grew up watching Smokey and the Bandit. Man.
Yeah, see, I didn't. I grew up on Celebrity Jeopardy on Saturday Night Live, and it'd be like, hey, Burt Reynolds.
Yeah,
it's funny because it's a big hat.
Yeah, Norm Macdonald, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Burt Reynolds was he's an icon. It was awesome. The car, just coolness, It was cool. Yeah. You let that guy live there.
Well, thank you to Daniel Levine of popculture.com for sharing that article. This last article that we're looking at, this one comes from Bloomberg.com, a little tiny newspaper. Maybe you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. It comes from Prashant Gopal, and it's talking about the rental glut that sends chills through the hottest U.S. housing markets. I love the title there, sends chills.
Mm-hmm.
What he was talking about is the fact that there is a cooling off happening with rental properties in the hottest housing markets. So it starts off, he says that Seattle is known for hip neighborhoods, soaring home prices, and being home to Amazon.com, the world's most valuable company. So why is the rental housing market experiencing the most severe slowdown in the U.S.? So the Seattle area median rents didn't budge in July after a 5% annual increase a year earlier and a 10% increase the year before. And this was according to Zillow data on apartments. Now, while that's the biggest decline among the top 50 largest metropolitan areas, it's part of a national trend. Rents in Nashville, Portland, Oregon, and other areas have actually started falling, and in the U.S., rents were up just 0.5% in July, which is the smallest gain for any month since 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty substantial statistic. You figure 6 years times 12, that's a lot of months.
Yeah.
That this is the smallest gain. So this is something that we first started to see 2 years ago in New York and D.C. Aaron Tazeras, a senior economist at Zillow, said in a phone interview, and a year ago is San Francisco and most recently Seattle and Portland. It's spreading through what once were the fastest growing rental markets, which, makes sense. Everything kind of comes back. It's not like it's just going to grow.
This is music to my ears for a different reason, but good for landlords in the long run. I'll explain it. We'll double back here in a second.
Okay. And this next paragraph here is saying that tenants are gaining the upper hand in urban centers across the U.S. as new amenity-rich apartment buildings constructed in response to big rent gains in previous years are forced to fight for customers. So rents are softening most on the high end and within city limits. So basically, there wasn't enough apartments in some of these cities that were kind of booming, and the rents were going crazy. So developers came in, built these really nice apartment buildings with great amenities. So now there's more options for renters. So now some of these hot markets, the rents are cooling down a little bit. Yeah. So what were you thinking of when you said that you like hearing this?
Well, let's talk about Seattle specifically. And it also mentioned DC. And those are two markets that should scare every landlord for a simple reason that there is legislation there that affects our industry in the background check industry, where they are now pushing legislation on landlords that restrict landlords from pulling criminal records on tenants, because the how competitive, the housing market is. And they are trying to level the playing field, which is absolutely insane to me that they would do that, to say, well, we want to make it fair for everyone. So let's remove criminal records so that everyone has an equal chance to get an apartment. Mm-hmm. For obvious reasons, I feel like that's crazy, right? So to me, I feel like, okay, if this slows down a little bit and, if Seattle and Washington, D.C. become a microcosm and people start to look at what's happened there, if this doesn't become a successful test, it won't spread elsewhere throughout the country. I think that's my biggest fear, is that this becomes something that catches on and, starts being adopted around the country and other places start to pick it up and say, yeah, let's start limiting what landlords can look at and how screening is done. And then, that's a slippery slope. Where does it stop? Eventually they say, well, you have to rent to whoever fills out an application. If you limit the landlord's ability to choose who they want to rent to, pretty soon you're not going to have a whole lot of people that even want to be landlords anymore. It's not going to be worth it. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest. It's the nature of the territory. You're going to have bad tenants. That's part of what makes this an interesting game. There's got to be a win and a loss here. The loss is for the landlords that don't do their diligence and have some sort of strategy on the front end to stay away from those tenants that can cause those type of problems and not pay and destroy the property and have a history of crimes in the property or damaging the property or being bad neighbors. So to remove the landlord's ability to screen them or to consider that information is very dangerous to me. Very, very dangerous.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. It's kind of weird because everybody's either a landlord or a tenant. If you're living in a building, you either own that building, you're a homeowner, or you're a tenant. There's really nothing else, right? Yeah. So, or I guess maybe you could say you're a child. You're living with mom and dad. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the laws seem to be swinging so much towards the tenant's rights and away from landlord rights. And at the end of the day, it's like landlords are the ones who dictate a lot of the housing market too. Mm-hmm. These are the people that are investing, and if they don't want to invest anymore, that's going to have impacts on the housing markets, and it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, and thankfully there are a lot of landlord advocacy groups in cities across the country, but fatigue is starting to set in. You can only fight the battle for so long, and you're going to lose some. And there's some important battles that are unfortunately being lost out there. There's some really important ones that are being won too, but in Seattle, I feel like that was an important one that landlords lost some footing there. They lost some ground.
Well, they did come back because of the advocacy groups and get some of those rulings repealed where they were trying to do like a first in, first screened, where you have to screen people in the order that they apply. Yep. I believe that one got repealed. Yep. And then
Didn't they also say that you can include sex offender, right? That was one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. They did get some concessions out of it too.
Well, it's all like a negotiation, right? Yeah. They come with more than they actually even want, right, and then they get some repeals or they get back to what they want, kind of thing. And it just seems like it's negotiations, but what are you going to do? Yeah. But up next, we got a landlord hotline call. It's been a little bit. Yeah. But we got a nice call here with a pretty detailed situation from Carrie, who's going to share with us. She's out in Illinois, what she's got going on. So let's take a listen.
I live in the state of Illinois and am a landlord of a multi-unit building. I have a tenant whose lease was up at the end of August of this year. He told me he would pay August's rent and has not. Now that it's September, his lease is up, but his unit still has all of his belongings in it. I'm not sure what to do next because he's not at the apartment anymore. He's not working in town anymore and has been allegedly, I've been told he's moved out of state. I believe that someone else potentially may be squatting in his apartment, but I'm not totally sure. I had to go in there for maintenance the other day and all of his things were there, or someone's things were there, but he was not. do I need to file a 5-day notice? Do I need to file an eviction notice? What are the next steps that I can take in order to legally follow the channels, but get his name and belongings, etc., off of that property immediately? Thanks.
Well, all right. So we got a few things going on here. It's nice of her to include the information on her state so we can get a little bit more specific with this particular case. But basically, just to recap, we have a tenant who sounds like they weren't paying despite being told, and having communication on August, which is the last month of their lease.
Yep.
And then come September, she goes to check out the property.
Yep.
Is under the impression that this tenant is gone, has abandoned the property. There is abandoned the rental, but there is still property in the rental.
Yep.
And she's not sure if it was that tenant or somebody who might be squatting.
Yep. Okay. So obviously Eric and I are not attorneys, and we would recommend that Carrie consult her attorney before she does anything. But here's my 2 cents on what I think is the right thing to do. So let's first address the issue of not paying the final month's rent, right? So she's going to go through and fill out a SOTA form, right? Is that final security deposit disclosure and disposition in terms of what's going to be coming out of that security deposit. So she may end up trying to recover some of that lost rent out of the security deposit.
Yep. Which we hear that in the Facebook group, people asking that. And yeah, that's a completely legal use of a security deposit to recoup lost rent.
Yeah, what you don't want to do, you don't want to let a tenant say, hey, I'm out of here. Go ahead and take my last month's rent out of the security deposit. That's a common mistake, because what can happen there is now the security deposit's gone.
Yeah.
They leave. You go in to do it, to go do your final walkthrough or whatever. They're already gone. The security deposit's technically gone because it went towards that final month's rent. There's nothing left on the security deposit, and now you find that there's damages. There's nothing left to pay the damages. Yeah. So you want to make sure you're going in the right order. But yeah, you can use it, to cover that. If you're going, if it's past due rent in this situation, it would be appropriate for it. I would not make the assumption that there's squatters in there. He said that he's gone. He left. His lease is terminated. Mm-hmm. It's over. I think she has the right to assume that that's abandoned property, and I would treat it as such. Yeah. I would change the locks. I would assume, like she had mentioned, she'd gone in there and that was his property and it was in there. I would treat that as an abandoned property. Yep. And then I would take the steps to handle the abandoned property.
So first one being always to document, take photos of all the property, right?
Yes. And let me just explain. Here's why, really quick. You don't want to take that squatter route, because if she does make the assumption that it's a squatter, now you're dealing with a whole different animal. Mm-hmm. Now you're dealing with a potential eviction of a squatter who may have rights because they are occupying that property. So right now, ignorance is on her side. She has every reason to assume that's his belongings that he abandoned and left there at the end of his lease agreement. Are you with me on that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And technically speaking, a tenant can become a squatter.
Yeah.
Where, that would be the most likely scenario. There's probably two of the most likely scenarios here is that the tenant is still living there. And, the neighbors maybe told her, we think he went out of town, but he is still living there. So he's become a squatter because he is not paying rent and he is not on the lease anymore. Or the other, probably the most likely scenario is he did leave town, left some, essentially garbage there. But you don't want to just go through and just start tossing everything, because then you might be on the hook as a landlord. So first steps, you're saying change the locks and then take an inventory of the abandoned property.
Yeah. Best way to do that is photographs, and then try to separate the items of value that you feel have value. There's a good chance that he probably just left junk in there, I would assume. But TVs, jewelry, anything that you feel has value, you want to try to separate that stuff.
Cabbage Patch dolls.
Sure.
I mean, especially if the stickers and they're still on. Remember those Cabbage Patch stickers?
Yeah. Furbies, any kind of
Trolls.
pop cultural items that may have a lot of value.
Beanie Babies.
Yeah, Beanie Babies. Yeah.
I was part of the Beanie Baby fallout. I had put my life savings into Beanie Babies, and it turns out that when you put them in the back of your car and where the
fade 'em
sun,
out, man.
you fade them out.
Big mistake.
Suddenly, you think you're sitting on millions, and it turns out you're not.
Yeah.
I lost my second wife that way.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah, none of that's true. I think I was like in second grade when Beanie Babies were popular.
Right. So you want to take inventory of the abandoned property, and then you want to store the property that has value. That gets dangerous, right? What has value? What doesn't? Something may not have value to us, but may have value to that person, sentimental value.
Yeah.
So I feel like that can be dangerous. I think most landlords take the approach of throw it in the garage if you have an attached garage or a garage with the unit, or throw it into storage, or, if you put it into storage, you can also charge that person the storage fees on top of it.
Mm-hmm. So next, you want to give written notice to the tenant detailing how and where to reclaim the property. If this person has left town, we've talked about this before, but you can speak to it as far as trying to find an address that you might be able to send that notice to.
Yeah, the easiest way, if they didn't leave you a forwarding address, is send them the notice, use the last known address, which would be the rental property that, your own property that you were renting to them. And then just put right next to or underneath the area where the stamp would be. So on the right-hand side of the envelope, address service requested. And the post office is going to get that. That signals to them that they know that you want the forwarding address. Mm-hmm. And so they will send you a little card in the mail. I believe it's green, blue. But you'll get it in the mail, and it'll have that person's forwarding address if the post office has it.
Yeah. So if this person left town and decided, you know what, I still want to get my mail, they go to the post office or online to forward their address, you can get that information as a landlord.
Yeah. Best case scenario or worst case scenario, the envelope gets returned. Hang on to that as proof that you mailed it. It was returned, unable to, to deliver, and you did your diligence. You did all that you can do to try to deliver that.
Sure. I mean, it might be worth it too to take the extra step of posting it on the outside of the property with, on the door or something like that, kind of like you would an eviction notice. But, talk to a local attorney, see what the, proper steps are there as well.
Yep.
But after doing that, deadline.
Yep. Usually 30 days. We did find in Illinois, specifically Chicago, it's only 7 days. So it brings up an interesting point.
And that's 7 days as far as the deadline.
Sorry, I cut you off there. Deadline to pick up the property. So it's interesting. Municipalities can sometimes diverge from state regulations. So check with your local municipality, not just state.
Mm-hmm. And it's not unusual to require the tenant to reimburse you for the cost of having to store their property if there was some costs incurred.
Yeah, not that you'll ever get that back, but good luck. Maybe out of the security deposit. So obviously document, because if there is a security deposit, then that could obviously be a line item in there that you may potentially be able to add to it too, and take out of there if you're not using that to recover the lost rent and damages done.
Yeah, and we got some notes here that we're looking at now, which is via nolo.com, which is a great resource when it comes to kind of legal and law items. And this is saying when the tenant doesn't reclaim the property, if you've given the tenant reasonable notice and they haven't come back for the property, you can dispose of it. To be safe, you may wish to sell the property at a public sale, publish notice of the sale in a prominent place, including a newspaper with a daily local circulation. Again, making like a documented history of like how long you kept the property for, when you sold it, all that, and then send the tenant a final notice that states where and when you will sell the property. So it's kind of a pain in the butt, but if you're worried about, it is. It's definitely a pain in the butt. But we talked about it before. We had somebody in the Facebook group who I politely told to leave because she kept doing crazy stuff. And I mean, she had an issue with abandoned property, and she took it and just took it to the person's new address and surrounded the car with all of the garbage.
Yeah. And we also saw that Facebook video. I believe it was in France.
Yeah.
Guy took a dump truck, backed it up to the tenant's new address and unloaded it. And don't get me wrong, there is a part of all of us that love that. Like even in the Facebook group, I mean, my immediate reaction was laugh and then like, oh no, you know what I mean? Like, haha, no, you can't do that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, there's a difference between
you're
like
at work,
street justice and
if you're at a job and everybody hates the boss, you want your coworker to tell the boss off, not you.
Yeah.
You know, it's the
Yeah.
same thing with tenants. You want somebody else to do that
Yeah.
crazy, egregious act. Don't do it yourself, because you're just going to, you're going to end up in a court. And frankly, a judge is going to look at you as Goliath and that person is David. And it's not hard to side with David, right?
yeah.
I got a lot of analogies shoved into one paragraph of thoughts there, but
Yeah. Well, I think most landlords would agree that the judge is not going to rule in your favor more often than not when it comes to, the poor tenant who had all of his personal belongings that were so near and dear to him, obviously not so near and dear that he was willing to just leave them behind, but so near and dear that now they're strewn all over, and it's not going to go in your favor. It's frustrating, it's annoying, but you know the name of the game.
yeah. So hopefully that helps carry out. I'll email her the recap of this episode. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, the easiest way to ask them, go to the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. Every week on Wednesdays, we host a live Ask a Property Manager video segment. You may have seen myself on there with Andrew Schultz, and we answer some questions in there. But you always get quick feedback, too, from all the landlords and property managers in the group. I think we're over 8,500 of them now.
Ooh, could we mention the milestone with the Ask a Property Manager and what's coming up next week?
Yeah, sure. We're approaching 1 year of doing weekly episodes of Ask a Property Manager. We're actually beyond episode 52, but Andrew says it's because I mixed the numbers up at some point, which I probably did. But yeah, where are we going to be?
We're going to be in Florida for the NARPM conference, which is the National
Association of Residential Property Managers.
Thank you. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So we're going to be going down there and visiting some old friends of the show. Kim Hampton.
Yep.
We're going to
Scott Hampton. Yep.
Yep. We're going to see Brad Larson.
Yep.
Andrew Schultz is going to be down there with us.
Mm-hmm.
Who else are we going to see?
I haven't talked to Harry Heist yet, but he's an active Facebook member who's like the guy for property managers in Florida for attorneys.
Evictions.com, right?
Yeah, evict.com, I think.
Evict.com, yeah.
So we're going to catch up with him, hopefully.
And I think you guys are going to try to do a live Ask a Property Manager video down there on location, right?
Yeah.
In the pool, is that true? Did I hear that right?
What's that?
In the pool?
Yeah. In the nude, in the pool.
Ever tell you I went to
Salacious.
I went to a conference one time, and these guys were doing a podcast in the pool.
Oh, yeah?
And all of a sudden, the hotel manager came out like freaking out, like, you can't have all this electronics in the pool. And nobody thought like,
Why are you holding a toaster?
right? Like nobody thought for a second like, this is a terrible idea that I've got this microphone in a pool.
Well, plus like the novelty of that is kind of lost on the listener.
Yeah.
Unless
yeah.
you like, you're splashing around a lot.
Yeah.
But I guess, I don't know,
It would go viral if the person dropped the microphone in the pool, though. I mean,
yeah, that's the one time you really don't want to drop the mic. You know? But I don't know. We'll come up with something fun. So if you guys don't follow the Facebook page, make sure you check that out too. Just look for Rent Prep on Facebook because that's where all of our videos initially get kind of hosted on, and then they get shared out from there into the Facebook group and other areas. I thought about maybe we could do, a little quiz, quiz people, see if they know their local state laws on a live video in Florida.
Yeah.
Property managers, maybe they wouldn't, I don't know. They might not want to do that, but we'll bring some headbands with us, some bandanas.
Cool.
Give them out as prizes. We'll figure something out.
Yeah. I love it.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Oh, well, that's also a good point too for next week. The podcast should still be airing because, we're going to be flying down on Wednesday and we usually get them out on Tuesday. So we should be good on a podcast still too.
Awesome.
Cool. Now we're just rambling. So why don't we wrap it up, Steve?
All right.
Why don't you send them off? Put you on the spot.
See you guys next week. Another great episode. That's it.